All right, let's move to the other game on Saturday, Stefan, the Topspiel. Leverkusen against Bayern. Leverkusen, just before we jumped on this podcast, and I mentioned this on the show earlier, they have announced the kit sponsorship with New Balance, switching from Castor. This was very much anticipated. And then, they wanted, of course, to use this stage to present this this new deal. No new jerseys yet. I guess they're coming next season. They have to stick with the Castor kits until the new year. It is a watershed moment, right? It's more money, it's better distribution, etc. Which I think, when we talked about this a little bit on the main show earlier this week, Leverkusen have aspirations to be a bigger international brand, to stick out, go deep in the Champions League, and all that sort of stuff. But I would also argue that to become a big brand, you should probably not be 11 points behind your title rival after Saturday's match. How optimistic are we that Bayern Munich are not going to go to Leverkusen now that they had this game in Glasgow, and now that it's job done? They win that game 2-1. They go on to Leverkusen now, and how optimistic are we that Leverkusen can make a match out of it, or that Bayern are not just going to go in, do a smash and grab, win this game 4-0, make the Bundesliga look ridiculous, and make Leverkusen look ridiculous in their brand building? How optimistic are we that that's not going to happen?
I mean, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, I'm not entirely sure how this game's going to play out, to be perfectly honest with you. I really wouldn't know where to put my money if I was a betting man in that regard. As to who's going to win this match, because we obviously took in Bayern Munich's win over Celtic on the bonus show last night, and we talked a lot about how Bayern looked good, but also at times looked quite vulnerable in defence, and perhaps looked a little fragile mentally to an extent in terms of how they kind of let that game slip away from them in the second half. And the way that Vincent Kompany implemented a tactic which backfired against Villa, backfired against Barcelona, and almost backfired against Celtic. And we talked about how, if Bayer Leverkusen or Xabi Alonso in particular were watching that game, they'd probably not so much licking their lips at the prospect of attempting to kind of, inflict some damage on it, but perhaps taking notes and thinking, right, well, we can work here, we can find space there, and really kind of maybe look to find a system that can pick Bayern Munich off. Because I think naturally you would think in a typical situation, this is a game that Leverkusen have to win. So you would think that Bayern would be happy to kind of sit back, maybe play counter-attacking, and then try and maybe take advantage of Leverkusen's need to get up the pitch. But I suspect that Bayern just won't let themselves do that because they're Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich never really sit deep in any game. They're not going to go there and settle for a point. So I think what will end up actually playing out is the game in which Bayern will look to try and dominate like they have done against Leverkusen and against Dortmund and against Leipzig and in many Champions League games, and they'll just kind of take the good with the bad over the course of 90 minutes. And so it'll be up to Leverkusen to see if they can match Bayern and if they can surpass them in terms of taking advantage of area pockets of the pitch where I think Bayern are maybe lacking. I thought both fullbacks against Celtic were okay, but were definitely there for the taking. Obviously, Eric Dyer was in place alongside Upamecano. I thought Upamecano had a good game, but I thought Dyer was a little ropey at points. I guess we'll have to wait and see what the backline is on Saturday, whether, Kompany decides to move Kimmich back to right back, although you think he would stick with Leimer because he tends to quite appreciate having him as his right back this season. Whether Kim or Ito will come in for Eric Dyer. I'd imagine that Kim will come in. I haven't actually checked to see if anyone's injured for this game. But was Kim on the bench against Celtic? I haven't even
Yeah,
thought
he
about
was. So the projected back four is Guerrero on the left, Kim, Upamecano in the middle, and Lima on the right.
Yeah. And who did they think will be in the
field? Can change, right?
But yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, well, I mean, if that is the back line, then fair enough, but that's still two fullbacks that you would think that Leverkusen could get at in more ways than one. Not to mention they obviously have forward players that have caused problems for Kim and Upamecano. Although I would say this season Kim's probably been the more kind of ropey one out of the two of them. I think Upamecano's probably having a really good season, to be honest with you. For the most part, he's kind of ironed out a lot of the kind of issues in his team, in his form. But there is that issue. And then we also talked a lot about how Bayern sometimes kind of struggle to implement a full press across the pitch because they have Harry Kane up front. So, for example, in that Celtic game, the Celtic defence and midfielder Cal McGregor had so much the ball in that game, and there wasn't really anyone there to press them, as you would expect if a team was fully pressing. And if Bayern Munich tries to do something like that against Leverkusen, but obviously give someone like Granit Xhaka plenty of space, then it will hurt them. So I don't know. I think it could end up being a really interesting and a really well contested game, to be honest with you. And maybe I'm just being hopeful because I'm going to, and I'm hoping it'll be a good game. But I don't know. I think obviously Bayern had the midweek game. Leverkusen have had the full week to train. And for the most part, I'm not entirely sure there's any huge injury concerns for Leverkusen going into the match. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of any. But maybe you can jump in and tell me, man, if I'm correct or wrong. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really, really tight match.
Yeah, I think the only players who are missing are, and we know about this, right? Is Belosian and Terry. Belosian obviously out with the ACL, and Terry out with the Achilles. But everyone else seems to be fit. So fit in fact that they have. It's really hard to project this lineup. Kicker has Boniface and Wirtz starting as two strikers. For example, I've seen Schicken as a number 9 up front with Wirtz as a number 10. With full complement of players for Javi Alonso, which sometimes you've seen this in the past. It's actually not a good thing for him because he tends to overthink it, right? I would make this quite simple. I would just play number 9. I would probably play Patrick Schick, to be honest with you, because I just think she's the more in form of the two, and maybe also maybe a bit more clinical. You can't really afford wasting chances against Bayern Munich. Granit Xhaka actually spoke in an interview with Bundesliga.com about this match and whether the fact that them having to win the game is going to change anything about their approach. And he said, we won't go into the game with the plan to play for a draw. We want to win every game, whether that's against Bayern on Saturday or against any other team. We have this mentality in the team, and we have earned it with good performance in the last few years. So we will go into the game with this mentality and try to take all 3 points here at home. I mean, have to. What else is he going to say, right? I guess the question is the approach on how to do that. Going in and trying to win this game. Because we all remember the return leg at the Allianz Arena and how passive Bayer Leverkusen were in that match. And I do think that at that stage of the season, Leverkusen were not the same Leverkusen as they are now. I know they've dropped points now with draws, but we also have to remember there was 11 games in a row that they won in the Bundesliga going in, heading into that game that they drew, right? So they were on a really good patch of form, and they still are on a very good patch of form. They really, where they dropped the points that hurt them right now was at the start of the season, right? That defeat to Leipzig and a bunch of draws at the start of the season, and now it's then very hard to kind of rope back in your opponent. And so this is going to be a bit of a different Leverkusen side. I don't think the approach that they selected at the Allianz Arena will work for them in this match, because Bayern Munich are like, okay, well, if you guys are not being proactive here, neither will we, because we just need a point. I think we're going to be quite happy with the 8-point difference. Bayern Munich can go out of this game with a point, and we'll say job done, right? Because that is still an 8-point difference, which again, no one has ever overcome an 8-point difference at this part of this stage of the season. It's already almost an impossible job for Leverkusen to begin with. They need to win this game to bring it back to 5, and even then it will be really hard. And so, the entire approach of how they played at the Allianz Arena, I don't think that's going to work here.
No, it won't. They have to definitely be far more attacking. I think another aspect that we have to bear in mind as well is just how many of these Leverkusen players were rested last weekend in that Wolfsburg win. So for anyone who missed it, Frimpong was on the bench, Patrick Schick was on the bench, Tapsoba was on the bench, Florian Wirtz was on the bench, and of course Grimaldo was suspended for one game and will be back for this match as well. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 of the starting 11, presumably for this coming game, didn't play last weekend or only played, 30, 40 minutes. So compare that to Bayern, who obviously had to go to Celtic, and it was quite a grueling match for the most part. I know they obviously won it, but it was a game that was really quite tight up until the end.
Yeah.
And we talked about it in the bonus show about how, Celtic obviously have a lot of fast players, so Bayern were having to do a lot of tracking back. It'll be interesting to see if that plays a big impact as well. Because, you're right, Leverkusen will have to kind of implement their own system. They're going to have to control this game as much as they can do. I think it was the last season's game again at the Bay Arena where, maybe it was the Allianz Arena, I can't remember. There was one game in which Leverkusen did control a game against Bayern, and they went on to do quite well in it. And that was the game where we thought, okay, wow, this team can actually go toe-to-toe with Bayern Munich. That's really interesting. That's kind of what we need to see in Saturday. We need to see them not sit deep and hope to pick off a win. They have to show up and be like, no, we're the German champions. We're the Bundesliga champions. We're here to win this game. We're here to prove that we're still the best team in Germany. And they won't really have any excuse. There's not really any injuries that they seriously have to worry about. Martin Terry is out. I mean, let's be honest, he's not really done anything for Leverkusen this season. So they'll have their strongest 11. They'll have a decent bench. They're at home. They've had full week to train. Many of the players haven't played a full 90 minutes in pushing 2 weeks leading up to this game. So, no, sorry, not 2 weeks, like 10 days, because obviously they had the Cologne Pokal match. So, there's no excuse for Leverkusen not to win this game, or at least not to try and win this game. I think it should make a really interesting match, and it'll be up to Bayern to obviously make sure they have enough in them or enough left in the tank to, to overcome them and try and win the game themselves. So, I don't really have a prediction, to be honest with you, but I do think it's going to be a pretty tight match, and hopefully it should be perfectly entertaining.
I'm not that optimistic for Leverkusen. I think if they have to play the way that they have to play this, and if they play like they did against Wolfsburg or even against Köln at times, this Bayern Munich team will happily take the invitation. And I mean, I've seen this so many times where we thought, okay, well, this is going to be a really interesting fixture. There's a title challenger that can really make this hard for Bayern Munich. Then it's usually, Harry Kane hat-trick, 4-0, goodbye, season over. And I know that this Leverkusen team isn't Bayern Munich, but we've seen it so many times before, and I don't know. It's just I worry about the fact that Leverkusen have A, made this gap so big, and B, that now they are forced into a situation that I think can totally play into Bayern Munich's hands, right? The fact that they have to be proactive, that they have to score goals, that they have to open up. That is all things that Bayern Munich relishes, and that I think that will make it it could make for a nasty result on Saturday.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see, I suppose. Like I said, it does play into Bayern's hands, but I think the problem is that Bayern can't really take advantage of that because they're not going to sit deep. They're not going to play defensively. It will obviously take a really composed professional performance from Bayern, and if they go to win the game, then fair enough. They've done more than enough to become the German champions elect, if you will. But yeah, it's kind of last chance saloon for Leverkusen and this title challenge, to put it bluntly. If they don't win this game, then the title race is over.
Yeah, I mean, I think it technically already is over, but that's just me. I'm very pessimistic. We'll see how it all plays out on Saturday. I'm looking forward to the game. I think it's going to be really, really interesting game. I'm with you. I think it's going to be very hard to predict. It's probably going to be a very, very tight by a Leverkusen win or a blowout for Bayern. There's no in between. So yeah, I see former Leverkusen player Bernd Schneider tipped a 4-1 win for Bayer Leverkusen. Yikes. That is optimistic.